Welcome, guys. Welcome to Echoes from the Wild. It's Jacques here. As you know, I'm an anti-poaching ranger, worked all over South Africa, and my podcast is about anti-poaching and wildlife conservation.
And today I have on the show, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ferdinand Scholtz. I also ex-ranger. Started my career in the tourism side of things. Went over to the anti-poaching guys. At that stage, I was already qualified as a medic. So for most of my career, I worked as a ranger and instructor mainly, teaching APU skills and providing medical care to guys out in the field. And yeah, these days I work as a security consultant as well as a training provider. We've got our own company where we provide consulting and training services for the guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm going to speak on that a little bit later because I'm quite excited for what's going to be happening next year. But we can chat about that later because I'm quite keen for that.
Absolutely.
Especially now that over the last couple of years, I've started getting more involved with the medical side of things, and I've done my TCCC through deployed concepts and a few other.
Very nice.
And it's awesome. It's so interesting. I've touched base on my first podcast where I mentioned that I've had 2 open heart surgeries, and I've always kind of like had a little bit of an interest in the medical field. And since I got into APU and started learning about tourniquets and, wound packing and gunshot wounds and stab wounds, and, I've just, it's piqued my interest even more. And, I want to become a qualified combat medic. And so that's my goal in the next year or two is to do my combat medic course in the States.
Yeah.
So but getting back to you, you mentioned that you were you got involved with the tourism industry before you went into anti-poaching. What was I always ask this, what was the thought process? What happened? What made you decide tourism guide, then anti-poaching, wildlife conservation? What was there something that you did before then? That suddenly just made you switch, or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a complicated story. So the guys that know me kind of roll their eyes at how I got to where I am, because when I wanted to be a ranger since I was like, I would say like 5 or 6. I grew up with conservation stories and wildlife stories and stories of my grandfather hunting in back then Rhodesia and Mozambique and those places. So I thought that was kind of the way for me to go.
Yeah.
And then somehow in I would say standard 9 matric, I kind of took off. Well, that's not standards anymore. Hey, it's grade 11 and grade 12. It kind of took a hard left interest into the pre-hospital medicine side.
Okay.
And in matric, I kind of tried to get into that. Wasn't so successful. Tried to apply to the UK military. Wasn't able to kind of follow through on that.
Okay.
And my folks kind of say, listen, you've always wanted to do this. They enrolled me in the Nature Conservation Diploma through Tshwane University of Technology, at TUT. But the medical bug just didn't want to let go. And kind of halfway through my first year, I decided botany is not my speed. Dropped out, obviously, to the annoyance of my family. Went to Netco, did my first medical level. It's a BAA, or basic ambulance assistant, and did that for like a year or 2.
Okay.
But the bush bug was still there, like the wilderness side was still there.
Yeah.
So I ended up going back. I qualified as did the 1-year program through a company called Eco Training.
Yes.
Qualified, graduated as as a trails guide, and got my Big 5 qualifications and guiding stuff. And then I did that for a bit. It's actually where I got introduced to my wife while working there. And during that time, I started doing courses, and I got the wonderful opportunity to work very closely with the guys from Pilanesberg National Park.
Okay.
The lady that was in charge of the rhinos called Lottie, and her husband Kobus. They the guys that really got me going with the anti-poaching. And that's really where I started learning about the effects the rhinos had, because at that stage, this was 09, 2010-ish.
Okay.
So it's just at the beginning of that massive spike that we had. And I started doing my courses. I got my firearms instructor ratings. I got the tactical instructor qualification, and I started preparing and training for that. And I got the opportunity on one of the courses. I met one of the largest, at that time, they were one of the largest training facilities in South Africa, and they were looking for an instructor, a training officer, that had the capability to sign off on the credentialed stuff, the first aid, and so it was a bit of an unorthodox way for me to get into the industry. But I walked out as a guide, and I walked into a training center where you were kind of the guy in charge, but because of your paperwork skills, not because of your ninja skills. But I was super lucky to work under guys that was really, really passionate about the industry. They put me through a bunch of courses while I was there on my first year to kind of get me up to speed with, to get me out of the CQB city vibe, because that's what most of the courses were back then. It was all aimed at the city guys, and to get me kind of in line from a Jeep jockey into patrolling. You know what I'm saying? And
into patrol boots.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I walked a lot, but in a guiding perspective. So they got me onto that tactical side and how to handle myself in the bush. And things just went from there. They worked with the. Sorry, I'm trying to get the names right without getting the names right. If you know what I'm saying, I don't want to call people out. And so they had a specialized team that worked with sandparks and with the hawks.
Okay.
Because I think that was 2013, 2012, 2013. We broke the 1,000 rhino mark that year. And we were then supported by a lot of NGOs, including US Fish and Wildlife. So we had a lot of resources, and I was very lucky. I just got in at the right time. And we did a lot of operations all over northern South Africa. We had clients all across northern South Africa. So we were super lucky with the anti-poaching stuff.
Okay.
And then after a while, I kind of left that, went back to medicine, did my next level on my paramedic side, and then kind of did a lot of other security related stuff and training. And so now here I am in West Africa doing what I'm doing. And then we've got our own thing relaunching next year.
Yes.
And so very excited about that. And we can chat to a certain degree. We can chat about what's coming.
Yes.
I can already hear my partners kind of cringing, like, don't give away too much, but we're pretty excited.
We keep some excitement for when everything happens.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, man. That is interesting. I mean, I actually know a couple of people, and one of the guys that I'm working with now, he's going to be on the second podcast, Z, getting his name right without getting his name right. He also he was actually an MMA fighter, and through sponsorships and through something else, he was asked if he'd be keen to. I don't know if I'm getting the story right. He was asked if he'd be keen to. I think it was go to Mozambique and just to go on a patrol with some of the guys, and he was and then I don't know how many years later, here in the Western Cape, he's doing anti-poaching still.
Yeah. I mean, it's a dangerous bug once it bit you, man. It doesn't let go. I still refer to myself as a ranger because that's my identity.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if I'm doing PSD or if I'm doing security consultant. At my core, I'm still a ranger, and I will always be a ranger. It's kind of your identity after a while. So
yeah. I mean, same here. I mean, it's just it's I haven't told many people this, but I'm not too sure if you know the story. I started out in the motor trade. I did 15 years in the motor trade. I worked for a family in the motor trade for close to 15 years. Before I moved to anti-poaching, I was a car salesman, and I was just like,
okay,
fuck this.
nothing wrong.
Fuck this. I'm going to the bush. Yeah, that's awesome. So I know so this is going to be not like my usual. Well, the last two podcasts. I think this is going to be more of a discussion, and I'm looking forward to some of the things that we want to talk about.
Yeah, no. Go.
Yeah. So is I don't know if you saw my post earlier on this morning on Instagram.
Yeah, I did. I actually had a chuckle because I saw it when I was chatting to my wife this morning, and we had such a chuckle about it.
Yeah, so I'm not too sure if you heard my voice note afterwards. No, I don't know if it's gotten to the point where I actually really don't care. So it was because of what Vetpol posted, and I've always been a huge fan of Vetpol. In fact, Vetpol were the ones who got me keen into anti-poaching. I came across one of their videos, and I was like, wow, this looks amazing. And then I came across Shamwari Private Game Reserve, and Shamwari have their own YouTube channel. And although they only have 2 or 3 episodes where they focus on anti-poaching, the rest is all wildlife conservation. I just saw what they did, and I just fell in love, and the passion was the passion for. I've always had a passion for animals and for wildlife. Yeah. But this just kind of like went to the next level. But yeah, back to the post about them teaching rope access for as a basic for anti-poaching. And it just blew my mind because I understand scaling mountains, but as a basic for training for anti-poaching, it scares me because what about dangerous game training? Shot placement for dangerous game, but even that's still more advanced, like basic tracking, being around dangerous game, moving through a big 5 reserve, which is something you would have done when you were doing your trails training or big 5. That's a basic for anti-poaching. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're kicking off early today. I thought we'll kind of warm up to some of these issues, but it's fine. I actually had a conversation with a friend and a colleague of mine that also comes out of the APU sphere, and he had a similar thing about CQB training on a basic APU course. Like, obviously, my background is a very strong training and education background, more than some of the other guys, I would say, operationally. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
But if you look at a basic anti-poaching program, the industry standard currently is a 6-week program. Now you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want to achieve in that 6 weeks? You kind of have to look at your student pool that's coming in. Are these guys from a local village?
Yep.
Are they ex-services guys? Are they kind of so guys like me with wilderness or wildlife experience coming in? And that will kind of very much dictate what your curriculum would be.
Yes.
But for the most part, you are looking at guys that's coming in that's got zero experience, zero wildlife, zero weapons, zero tactical knowledge.
Yeah.
and you only have 6 weeks
Yeah.
to kind of turn a regular Joe into a semi-competent team member.
Yeah.
Because the moment that guy graduates, he just knows how to function in a team. He's not like you always hear people like you do the course, but you actually just start learning once you join a team.
Correct.
So you as an instructor team or cadre or education center, your responsibility is to turn that guy from someone that knows nothing into someone that won't shoot himself in the foot on the first patrol.
Yeah.
Because that is technically all you have really time for.
Yeah.
And during this time frame, you need to educate on physical fitness, discipline, because it is a law enforcement centered subfield of conservation.
Correct.
Because that's another thing you need to remember, that this is a profession within the conservation sector.
Correct.
Got
to be serious.
The military, so it's more towards law enforcement side than it is to the military side.
Correct.
And sometimes I think guys kind of forget that. And if you look at a lot of the very sexy schools that's currently operating, they've moved away from that conservation law enforcement to rural counterinsurgency style training. Yeah. Now, during that 6 weeks, you have to, like I said, you have to teach that guy weapons craft.
Yep.
You have to teach him basic musketry. You have to teach him basic survival. You have to teach him basic tracking, wildlife etiology, or animal behavior.
Yes,
is the term, animal behavior, and then basic conservation practices.
Yeah.
Like fence maintenance, how to identify sick animals, and introduce that type of spirit, because ultimately he will form part of a team that assists with all of these things.
Correct.
And not just gung-ho on a hilltop with a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
Because legally, you have to operate within the South African Private Security Regulatory Act. Because if you're not working for the government, you're working private industry. So whether you're working directly for a game reserve, that game reserve has to have an internal registration with SERA to work a security team. Or if you're working for a security company providing these services, you still have to follow the same rules.
Correct.
So it's self-defense rules. You can't just ambush at will.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
You can't even use the word ambush anymore. You have to use advanced OP.
No, because that implies premeditation.
Correct.
So legally, you're sitting with this culture that's being created by service providers, providing this training of guys coming out of, and we've seen it time and time again. They kind of get the gunslinger nickname because this dude's a gunslinger. It's not going to end well. Like, calm down. Let's go for a walk, because that's technically what you're there for. The whole observe and report and area denial type patrols. That's the type of things that you will do most of the time. And guys kind of forget that. So getting back to that curriculum. So that's what you have time for on a 6 week. Teaching a guy how to tie knots, great. Teach him how to tie knots, because that's how he's going to get his bivvy or his shelter. Great. If a guy is going to work in the Drakensberg Mountains or in the Swartberge there by you guys, then teach him mountaineering skills. But then that section replaces something that he would learn in another area.
Correct.
Because if there's no dangerous game, but he's working in the mountains, okay, remove the dangerous game section, add a mountaineering section.
Yes.
So cater for that environment. But if you in the Lowveld region where it's so flat and you've got these massive Mupani thickets where you don't know which side's which side anymore because everything looks the same, abseiling is a bit of a useless skill.
100%.
I would then say focus on navigation.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
You build it to what the training is there for. But that first 6 weeks, that basic training, now guys call it advanced field range or advanced ranger training. it's just a marketing gimmick. It's ranger training.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've even started changing the names to their courses. It's no longer an anti-poaching course, you know. It's one company has it's called rural training. I think it's I'm not too sure, but it's something rural, advanced rural. Not warfare, advanced rural.
I think I know what you're talking about, but like we won't.
No.
The names are very sexy, and that's fine. I mean, if you are training a rural security operative, that's fine, but don't call it a ranger because that's not what they are.
Yeah.
If that's the skill set that he's going for, and it's patrolling and ambushing and counter ambushing and all these things, sure, that a field ranger does need to know this.
Yes.
Because it is, like I said, that falls within that environmental law enforcement type of skill set.
Yeah.
But don't try and sell it for what it's not.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly the words that I used this morning. Stop selling anti-poaching for what it's not. Yeah, I used those words. I can't remember what words I used this morning, but I used stop selling. Yeah.
That's probably why it's stuck in my head.
I mean, yeah, I remember my first gig, a friend of mine asked me for a photo, and it was a friend that I trusted. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I sent him a photo of, me standing out in the field, AR-15, bulletproof vest, and then he goes and posts it on Facebook saying, my friend Jacques, and tags, I don't have Facebook anymore, but he tags me in it. My friend Jacques van Straten out in the bush killing poachers. My mind blew, and I was like, you can't say that.
That's a bit of a PR issue. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, we can chat about the social media stuff as well a bit later, because I think that is super important, though.
Yes.
The image that's being portrayed there. So I think we should actually chat about that as well.
Yes, I mean that's also a part of the reason why I kind of started Ranger Guardians, was just to kind of stay, well, besides helping rangers and besides kind of the whole educational purpose and trying to help rangers with uniforms and training and boots and all of that, is also just to try and be real. And also try and stay clear of the cowboys and crooks whole, look that everyone seems to go for nowadays.
Hey man, don't get me wrong. I've been there. I've gone through that phase. I was ready for it.
Same here. When I first graduated, and I was like, yeah, like holding an AR-15. I'm like, get
out of here. Yeah. So, I mean, this is more comment out of experience and self-realization.
Yeah.
Because I've seen and I've experienced what a negative impact that can be on an organization, because you do impact what the community sees.
Yeah.
And if you are being seen as a bunch of cowboys and gunslingers, and yeah, you just negatively affect your own image, and it's that whole hearts and minds thing.
Yeah.
You're pretty much an island out there.
Yeah.
Bound by civilian laws.
Yep.
And we've on our teams, we've had guys in the past that got assaulted in the towns, and assassination attempts on our guys. And I think the most famous now is the team leader from Timbavati. They actually made a documentary about him now, and he's one of many guys.
Yep.
And I think it was fortunate that. Okay, let me rephrase that. It was unfortunate that it happened, but it was fortunate that it was during the filming of that documentary.
Yep.
Because it brought so much light on what local rangers are facing at home.
Yep.
And because it's a real dangerous job for the local guys.
Yep.
And for you and me sitting here, we don't live in those communities.
No.
We do our rotation. We go 200, 300, 400, 500 kilometers away back home and we do our thing, and then we go back there. Obviously now for the managers and the reserve managers, they stay in the areas, but still, like, the mistakes that you make and the image and the leadership that you portray will influence those guys that live in those communities.
Correct.
And it draws a lot of attention to them. I would never forget this. We were on a training exercise on my 2IC at the time. Obviously, for the guys that don't know, a lot of the anti-poaching guys work on a military style ranking system.
Correct. Yeah.
You've got obviously your ranger, then you've got corporals, sergeants, and then your manager guys are and above. And this guy was a sergeant on the team, a very senior, very experienced guy. And just the one day we were out in the field with a training exercise, and he gets a call from his wife. Apparently, there's local guys that we've been watching or we're aware of that's surrounding his house. Like, that's not the type of thing you want to expose these guys to. So this whole gung-ho cowboy type mentality kicking down doors, it needs to change. It's a very important thing.
Well, this is why I talk a lot about education, because being we as rangers, we have the power to educate. We have the power to help. Yeah, I read an article recently about surrounding communities in the Kruger or around the Kruger National Park who don't even know what the rhino is, but hate the rhino. They don't know what a rhino. They've never seen a rhino, but they hate the rhino because the rhino gets 24/7 protection and better protection than local law enforcement are able to give them, which is true. Yeah. I mean, most rhino, 90% of rhino around South Africa are better protected, by 2 or 3 teams sometimes at a time. When I was in Kruger, there was at least 3 two-man teams out in the field at a time, and then a whole base.
That's a small operation, to be honest with you. That's a small operation. I'm saying.
I mean, and then with a whole team at base ready to roll out, when the call came.
Yeah.
So, and then you get these people in the community who, struggle to get hold of law enforcement, or law enforcement themselves are corrupt. And will drive by a mugging or whatever, and just ignore it, or not even come out to a call out. I remember sitting OP in the Kruger and reporting in gunshots, doing gunshot reporting, and it's coming from the local community. And then we just that's it. You continue sitting OP and and you kind of think, okay, well, that's outside the reserve, so it's fine. The rhinos are safe. The elephants are safe. My team is safe, but someone in the community, might have bullets raining down on them because some guy's drunk shooting bullets up in the air.
And there's so many stories like that, and I won't share it on a platform like this because I think it'll sour the mood. But it's happened so many times where you are the only resource in the area, and it's known that the local authorities are corrupt. There's active investigations against them, so they won't respond or they won't do anything. They won't prosecute the arrests that's being made, and so. Hopefully that's changing now. I think the guys like IPID, which is the Independent Police Investigating Directorate, it's like the internal affairs for South African police. They've kind of made a big shift to kind of weed out these corrupt cops in the rural communities.
Okay.
Because a lot of the times you arresting their relatives for poaching.
Yeah.
and it's happened. Like you march guys into you do a combined operation with like the hawks or stock theft, because the wildlife crimes fall under stock theft for the most part.
Yeah.
And turns out it's the station commander's cousin or far off second distant niece or something. Oh,
Yeah.
whatever. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it gets really awkward really quickly because the communities are so small.
Yeah.
And like you said, they don't have the resources. They don't have vehicles. They don't have manpower.
Yeah.
And then you're next to these 5-star hyper luxury lodges with choppers and vehicles, and they've got all the resources that they need, but the community's up, and it drives a lot of the resentment, like you said.
Yes.
And you see it on those greater Kruger parks where you've got boundaries like next to Sabi Sand.
Yeah.
It's got a 75-kilometer boundary with the local community on the eastern side. So it's not the eastern side, the western side.
Yeah.
Eastern side is the Kruger National Park. There's no fence there. Then you've got this Fort Knox style fence bordering the community, and the houses and the community is right up against that fence.
Yeah.
So how do you justify that type of thing? Like, you start feeling a little guilty because you've got these resources, but then again, like, you keep getting incursions from these because they're hungry.
Yeah.
So you get this massive subsistence poaching problem.
Yeah.
Because the guys are hungry. But now the problem is, it goes from subsistence poaching to commercial bushmeat, and the next thing you know, it's rhinos and elephants and those types of things. So it affects the job immensely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said, with meat poaching, for me, it's always been a bit of a catch-22 because, pisses me off immensely how, the animal suffers. Especially with the snare or trap or whatever the method is.
Yeah.
But then, you've got to take into consideration. For example, when I was in Hoedspruit, there was this couple, woman was pregnant, thin, hadn't eaten in days. They're illegally fishing, poaching. It's still, it's meat poaching.
Yeah.
But they're literally she just wants to get some protein in the body. My husband's like crying and begging on his knees,
it becomes that's where you sit between. You can be the conservation officer, do your job like you're supposed to, or you can be the asshat that bullies these people and makes a case.
Yes.
And that comes down to management practices. Like, obviously, the guys on the ground have certain SOPs and rules that they have to follow.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get around that. You're there to provide a service.
Yes.
So people shouldn't forget that either. But how you execute that is kind of your discretion on the ground, as in, how do you want to be the Gestapo of fisheries?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be the friendly conservation officer that actually does his job properly? Like, don't get me wrong, there is times for that. Like, okay, wait, let me rephrase that. There is times to be a little bit more proactive.
Yes.
In how you prosecute and pursue certain trespasses.
Yes.
But I actually want to use the example of what the guys are doing in Mozambique now. Not everywhere, but for the most part, a lot of these large hunting concessions.
Yeah.
Where they've made these arrangements with local communities. They employ out of the local community. A lot of the proceeds from these hunting operations go into local communities. They employ ranger teams to sweep for snares. But the arrangement they make with the community leaders is, any meat that's being shot here, obviously the trophies are going to wherever they're going to, but the carcasses stay there.
Yes.
And that goes then to the local community.
Okay.
So that's cut down so much on
Meat.
The subsistence level stuff that they don't have to worry about the subsistence stuff. And the basic rule is, if we do catch some of your community guys poaching here, we cut off that meat supply.
Yes.
So the community start policing it themselves because they've got a vested interest in that operation.
Start holding each other accountable.
100%. Because now it's got value. Dino King is a very good example of this. I think, like, I'm not too up to date with what's happening there now. But again, they're surrounded by communities in the Hammanskraal area, and there's so much community reserve conflict because of cutting fences to get firewood, to get grazing for their livestock. And that is a very difficult, I don't know how they're managing it now, but like that is a very sensitive political topic, man. The quickest way you get your reserve burnt down is like you start fighting with these guys unreasonably, like your use of force type stuff starts escalating. So you have to be so careful and so sensitive to their culture and how to manage these things. Like I said, obviously there's a time and a place. But you can't, everything doesn't happen with kid gloves. And that's that image, and that coming back to that image that you want to portray to the outside and to the local communities.
Correct,
You can't be that high speed SEAL team ranger Delta ninja
I had
the whole time.
I had one guy, funny enough, I can mention this because he no longer works for the organization. His name was Poacher. I was his. It was a bit of a shit show back then. I was his 2IC, but I didn't have a contract as 2IC. In fact, I didn't even have a contract. And I got called out to go to this place because he had arrested someone. But he had also fired 2 warning shots in his general direction.
Okay. Who fired? The ranger or the other guy?
The ranger. His name was Poacher. Yeah. And he was so proud of himself. It was a 308.
He made a contact.
308 AR-15. And he was like, I fired 2 warning shots. Why? The guy had his back to him and was running back to the river to swim across the river because he saw this big, tall guy with this AR-15. And he just dropped his cup and he ran back and anyways, Poacher got him and arrested him. When I got there, his pants were soaked, not because of getting back into the river. And all he had with him was some clippers to clip some fruit off some trees.
Yeah, I mean, it brings back
again. That goes to that whole like cowboy, that whole cowboy concept about just I've got a gun now, like I'm God, I make the decisions here, I choose, for me that's like we both said just now, when you first got into the role, it was like this is so cool. But again, with experience, with experience and maybe a little bit of age as well, and what's the word? Maturity. You start to realize, like, hey, human life does actually matter. Human life above all. And also, I think from some of the stories that my friends have told me, I might have brought this up in one or two in the first or the second podcast, but this kid, he's now 21 years old. Yeah, I did bring it up, but I didn't bring his age into it. He finished his training when he was 19. He's now 21 years old. He's been stabbed in the back with a machete. He's been shot at by an AK-47 multiple times. He's been to several farm murders, with the one where I'm not going to go into the details, but because he was the only one with medical training. The things that he saw at this specific farm murder, when he told me, I was just like, I could just see it in his face. This 21, I mean, I'll still call him a kid because to me he is like a little brother to me. The training that we went through and the camaraderie that we went through. A lot of the guys that I did my training with, the first guy I did in my podcast, Comrink, these are all people that I value in my life. And just seeing his face, and I just saw that he was no longer this 19-year-old kid that was enjoying this training, like training to lay ambush and training to to counter track and catch a poacher and shoot them with a paintball gun. He was no longer that kid. The excitement wasn't there. And for me, that's just it was a big wake up call to decide that there needs to be a way that we start approaching this line of work with a different attitude. And I think the first way for me is starting with the community and starting educating the community and trying to reach out and try and work hand to hand with them so that we can try and bring the statistics down at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few points there as well. Sorry, I'm making notes because what I do is I get distracted and I start running down an alley and I forget what I want to say.
I should probably start doing the same thing. I should probably start doing the same thing.
No, so I just want to go back to the use of force thing, the warning shots, and that's a discussion I had with a friend of mine. Literally yesterday, we talked about the use of force and the CQB training and whatever, and it comes down to two things. That obviously the guys don't realize the liability of pulling a trigger, because that's a subject that's not being covered in some of the training schools. I remember when we were tasked to teach this the first time in our training, like it's a full day. Arresting forces of arrest. Am I saying that correctly now? Use of force rules. Arresting the rules where you can arrest. I'm struggling with that term right now in my head. But it just sitting there trying to explain some of these concepts that I barely understood. And I had this PowerPoint up on the wall. And it's all this legalese on the Criminal Procedures Act and Section 49, and I can't remember all the acts that we had to cover. But sitting in front of these suddenly this 35 Ranger students with these blank expressions, like realizing that they're even more bored than I am right now, and I'm going to fall asleep teaching this. But you have to. It's such an important thing, and the Kruger actually had a very good initiative where they sent these two advocates that prosecuted in Skakuza court, that prosecuted these cases and defended rangers and so on. And they started going around doing talks to educate guys on use of force and on arresting powers. And what is the implication for you as a ranger if you shoot someone? And I almost want to say like 70 to 80%, and this is not a thumb suck statistic, but 70 to 80% of the guys graduating schools now have zero clue on what is the consequences, what's happening after the bang. Like you're gonna have to take responsibility for that trigger. Like ultimately, your boss is not going to be there to defend you.
No.
Hopefully, he provides you with a lawyer. Hopefully, he's got public liability insurance, because if they sue you, you're going to have to pay. So even if there's no criminal case, they can still make a civil case. And we've had that many times where you end up shooting dogs when that come into the reserve, and then the next thing you know, you've got a detective knocking at your door. Now there's a destruction of property case against you, because livestock and pets is considered property under South African law. So now there's a criminal case for destruction of property, regardless of why that dog was in there.
Correct.
So the guys don't understand that liability. So I would say skip the knot tying, teach them some law. You know what I'm saying? Because that guy with a basic grade 6 or 7 or 8, like a very basic education, is going to have to stand in a court of law and defend himself. He's gonna need to write a statement. Because he doesn't have. If the organization he works for doesn't support him and doesn't provide him with a lawyer, he's going to have to stand there and
not tie knots.
He's going to have to write a statement. If he implicates himself in a statement, he's just admitted guilt to something he might be innocent of. So rather spend your time on teaching the guys this liability and the make them understand the consequence and the responsibility they have the moment you give them that rifle or that shotgun or whatever, this lethal device. Even a paintball, man, that's assault. If you use it inappropriately, it's still assault.
And
You are
also
a
not just that,
private
like
citizen providing a private security service.
yeah, some of them
Sorry?
use the HDR 50s, those solid nylon rounds, those solid.
Yeah.
I mean,
Things can be lethal, man.
you can kill someone with that. I mean, I've been shot in the back with that thing, and that's painful. That is painful.
Man, just carrying it proves intent that you intend to use it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm not a legal expert by any stretch, but if you carry something, there's an intent that you might have to use it,
Correct.
and that you're willing to use it because you have it. Then it's up to you to kind of defend yourself in like, listen, was this justifiable? Was this not justifiable?
Well,
So
again,
it all comes back to that training
yeah.
mindset that the guys graduate with.
Yeah.
And your instructors are super responsible for that.
Yes.
Because they are the ones creating that culture.
Yeah. Agreed. 100% agreed. And then,
yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of also ties in with social media. Well, for me at least, it does. It ties into social media.
Yeah, it does.
What's being
100%.
portrayed out there.
100%.
Especially, you mentioned just now that you think you know which company I'm talking about. But there's a company, and I'm referring to their rural course or whatever it is, and they've got guys in full tack gear with helmets, and the night vision
NVGs and plate carriers,
and the AR-15s, and they're in a linear formation. I call it linear formation. I think most people call it extended line formation.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
And they're moving forward, and they've got their lasers on, and they're firing rounds. Like you should like.
Yeah, I mean it's like I said, horses for courses. The discussion again comes back to what is the requirement for that team that you're training up. That is not a basic skill. Okay, so again, back to it's a law enforcement function, so there is some tactical skills that have to be taught.
Correct.
Fire maneuver is one of them because there is a risk of making a contact.
Yes.
Not the Virunga National Park in the Congo level contacts that you might see.
Yeah.
Or what the guys saw in Mozambique and Zim in the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Or
that's not what you're going to see.
Or
but
what Grey Dynamics said, this isn't tears from the sun.
I'm going to get to them now. So horses for courses, like I said.
Yeah.
The thing is, you still have to legally be able to justify the action that was taken.
Yeah.
And teach the skill, but teach them why the skill is important. Teach them what is the consequences of the skill being applied.
Yes.
And like I said, I'm all for tactical training.
Yeah.
It increases the survivability of the ranger,
of the units of the
but
ranger,
make sure he understands why that is being taught.
Yes.
Make sure he understands the scenario where this would be applied.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the guys fail.
Yeah.
And also make it realistic.
Yes.
Like I've been doing this for about 15 years now, 15, 16 years, and I've been very fortunate to work with some very proficient guys and organizations. And to be honest with you, I don't see many people with that type of equipment because they cannot afford it.
Yeah.
Listen, man, if I can have a pair of 31s and a nice sexy AR and all the bells and whistles, man, I'm the first guy that'll pay that money if I have it.
Yeah.
But you don't have $50,000 to $60,000 to equip a single guy.
No.
That's more of a budget for an entire team for like 2 years.
Well, I mean, where I'm at the moment, we don't have uniform and we don't have boots. We've got our own stuff. Yeah.
So just be realistic on what you're teaching the guys. And full disclosure, man, I wouldn't mind going to that course. I think it's such a good course to go to because of the skills. But that's not an entry level. That doesn't turn a guy into a ranger. It turns into a rural security operative.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes.
He's not a ranger then.
No,
So don't call him a ranger.
100%.
And I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. Like, I've been very vocal on social media about some of these things, and like I've stepped on some toes because I used to be that guy, and I kind of changed my mind a little bit because if you don't change, you don't evolve, right?
Correct.
And so I'm all for it. It's amazing skills, but the relevance of it needs to be explained.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, don't sell it for a basic entry-level
100%.
ranger course if it's not.
And the thing is, some of their courses are like 80,000, 90,000 rand. And I mean, for 80,000, 90,000 rand, I kind of feel that, for a 6-week course, I mean, my course that I did, and look, I mean, my course was, again, very basic. Very basic. I mean, we had 2 days on hand-to-hand combat. We had 2 days on firearms training. You can't teach that type of stuff in 2 days.
No, I mean,
but
it comes back to the curriculum development as well.
Yeah.
Like, you have to decide. I'll never forget this meeting. We sat in this meeting, and that's kind of I taught 1 or 2 courses at that stage, and we had like a mind shift at the center, and it's like, what are we trying to teach these guys? Are we teaching them to suffer? Because that's easy. We can teach them that. And there's many schools that like, listen, if they can give a certificate for suffering, like, I can give you some recommendations to where to go. Like, I had friends with like kidney failure at some of the schools, and like, because they're hungry, they're tired, they're dehydrated, they're badly managed. Like, but what did they learn? They learned how to suffer.
Yes.
That's what they learned.
Yes.
Is that what we're trying to do? No, we're trying to graduate a ranger that's a competent team member.
Yeah.
That can be built. You're trying to set a foundation that can be built on.
Yeah.
And we made that shift, and we decided, like, these are the things we want to develop. First of all, the self-discipline, because he has to be an independent operative. He must be able to work in a 1 or 2 or 3-man team, a small team, because that's what you're going to have most of the time. You need to be able to be self-driven enough to kind of take care of his own PT, because you won't always be able to be there. He needs to be able to have that personal drive to stay awake during a night shift.
Yeah.
If you give him a route to patrol, you know that he's going to patrol the route and not take a 10-kilometer shortcut because he's got a 20 kilometer stretch of fence to patrol.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Then, obviously, wildlife and wilderness skills.
Yeah.
He's part of a conservation team, ultimately. So he needs to know how to take care of himself in the wilderness environment.
Yeah.
Identify different bird and animal species, and kind of look for signs where you think, okay, this might be an issue. So when I get back and I do my post-report patrol, and I give a post-patrol report, to my team leader or supervisor or manager, that he can go to the ecology guys or the reserve manager. Listen, my guys have said, listen, you've got sick animals in this sector. You've got possibly damaged fence in this sector. We need to get the maintenance guys out there.
Yeah.
We decided that these guys need to be proficient with weapons, because you're issuing them, a lot of the times they get semi-automatic rifles.
Yep.
And we don't want them to shoot themselves or someone else in the foot. So, okay, a large portion goes to basic musketry and riflemanship.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what I was going to. That's what I was going to mention, is that, with some of these courses that are costing 80,000, 90,000 rand, I kind of feel that they should.
80.
80. Yeah.
I promise not to swear, so that's a lot.
Actually, we haven't sworn yet, have we?
You've had a couple of close calls, but I think I've been doing pretty well.
Okay.
So maybe I'm just being biased now.
So 80,000 rand. I feel that they should, instead of having the rope tying and the introduction to NVGs and how to use NVGs and to a certain extent low light work, I I think is good, because especially in our environment where you're not using torches,
Critical.
it's exactly, it's critical. But I feel that instead of doing 6 weeks, they should maybe do 7 to 8 weeks, but then also still have 2 weeks of theory of study work, so that when they get there, they get tested on the theory that they've done, and if they haven't done their theory, send them home. Give them a second chance to come back at a later stage when for the next course or whatever. I just feel that 80,000 Rand, man, like you should be taking some of the things that aren't necessary, like the knot tying, like the NVG work, and room clearing. Like really, like room clearing for me isn't necessary. I would rather work on bush tactics, moving around a bush line.
Again, it's situation and end user dependent. Like if you're going to work rural Limpopo, I would say understand basic cover and concealment.
Yeah.
Because most of the structures there are sheet metal. It's not going to offer you much cover.
Yeah.
So focus, adjust your curriculum accordingly. Now, on the flip side, if you work for a municipal conservation organization, and I'm going to use someone like Cape Park, for example, because I know they've got a very robust program.
Yeah.
City of Cape Town. A lot of their parks are in peri-urban or suburban environments.
Yes. Yeah.
So you get what you get where I'm going with it. Now, obviously, those guys, I don't know the specifics. I don't think they're armed. But should they be armed, the environment will dictate what would be the use case, the end user requirements there.
Correct.
So if it's a rural thing, keep it rural. I mean, yeah, by all means. We used to do a 1-day introduction to structures. We do like I think it was like an 8-hour block of structures. Like, listen, this is a structure. This is how you move around it.
Yeah.
Let's do a couple of runs, because the guys have guard houses, they've got accommodation, and worst case scenario, they might have to search these places for poaching paraphernalia or whatever. But you don't spend weeks on that, because that is not the end use.
No.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would rather divert that time to vehicle work.
Yes.
Like rather embussing, debussing, counter ambush drills, vehicle searches, improvised roadblocks. Now that's another one that I need to hammer on.
Next episode, we will be chatting to Ferdy again for part 2. We'll be continuing the conversation. Please like and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube and on Spotify. Thank you very much for joining.